Let's pay a visit to Mark's True Crime Corner.
This is not a good neighborhood. I'm scared.
Now, here's your host, Mark Thompson.
I want to also welcome my other half and the person who really has an abiding interest in this stuff, and that's Courtney, everyone. Yeah.
Hi. Yep. I've pre-adjusted. I'm here.
Yeah.
Now.
We both have COVID, but you
Yep.
seem to be bouncing back more quickly.
Yeah. Well, I've got a couple dozen years on you.
It's not
Yeah,
fake.
well, you're a little younger. What's the problem, Albert? Is there an issue?
Oh, good.
That's not fake.
Well, we have a
That's
guest
real.
today. Yeah.
I'm excited about the guest.
know.
Please introduce the guest.
Well, today we have Carrie Wilson joining us for the segment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so excited that Carrie agreed to come on and join us today. Hi, Carrie.
Hello, Carrie.
Hi, Courtney. Hi, Mark.
Now tell us how Carrie is linked to this story.
Carrie knew the victim in this story.
Wow.
And a little background, Carrie and her father and her stepmother are supporters of the show, fans of the show, and supporters of this segment, which is really wonderful. They've
They've been with us since the
week.
radio.
Yeah.
They've been with us since we were on KGO radio. That's
Yes,
exactly right.
yes. I haven't even listened to you for that long.
No.
To be honest. And Carrie was so great. We had a wonderful conversation. She's just fantastic. And I asked her to join us today so we could talk about this crime. This is the murder of a young girl named Linda O'Keefe, who was murdered in 1973. And then they found and arrested the murderer in 2019.
Wow.
That's 46 years after the murder. But Carrie can shed some light for us on not only the community in which this happened, but knew and went to school with Linda O'Keefe, who was the victim in this story.
And how old was she when she went missing?
She was 11.
And so I don't mean to interrupt,
I was going to ask Carrie. So
Yeah.
Carrie, tell us a little bit about your background. You grew up then in Orange County, California, because this happened in Corona Del Mar.
Yes, I grew up in Corona Del Mar. And Mark, I just have to say, I've been listening to you since I learned how to drive, and that was a long time ago. 3 years. But,
I'm glad you got that
yes.
driving thing worked out too. Yeah.
So am I. So I grew up for part of my young life in Corona Del Mar on a street called Goldenrod. And Linda lived about 5 or 6 blocks over on Orchid. Corona Del Mar was a beautiful community, very safe. I'm sure if we ran the statistics, it would show that it was, very low crime. Certainly, there had never been any kind of child abduction or anything. And so I went to school with Linda, and Linda was such a nice young person. She was one of the few people in, elementary school, of course. Kids sometimes could be, not very nice. And Linda was always just such a sweet girl. And, we would eat lunch together and walk home together. She lived about half a mile farther than I did from the school. But yeah, so
You would walk, just the two of you would walk from school together?
Well, when school got out, of course, there were other kids around, but her and I would walk together, just her and I.
Yeah. I'm just curious, especially those times we would now think twice, 3, 4 times before we let kids walk, even 2 young girls walk by themselves. I mean, it's just crazy how I just feel society has become far more predatory in some of the things we have to deal with than in, even the 70s. There was bad stuff going on in the 70s as we, we're about to hear.
Yeah, because this happens when Linda's walking home from school alone. And that is when she is taken by the person who ultimately murders her. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, so go ahead.
Yeah, so you were saying that you both walked home from school, and that it's really so interesting. It's been one of the first times that I've ever spoken to somebody who knew the victim as much as you did, and just to understand what a sweet soul and sweet young girl Linda was, is truly moving.
Yes, she definitely was, because I have always remembered her not obviously just because of this horrible tragedy, but because, she was one of the few friends that I, went to school with. And I, have a very faint memory. Of course, we're going back to elementary school, but I think we had homemade clothes in common. So,
oh yeah, yes.
yes, absolutely.
So
And
what happened with the story?
So Linda went to summer school, and Linda was in summer school. The day is July 6th, 1973. And Linda's at summer school. I think it was her math teacher or tutor, or piano teacher, offered to drive her to summer school. So she didn't ride her bike. And if you're watching, you can see Linda. There's a photo of Linda with her bike. She did not ride her bike to summer school, as she might have on certain days. So when she got to summer school, it was required that she would then have to get home by herself. She does call her mom and her sister, and she asks them to pick her up because she doesn't want to walk home, but they're not available. Barbara is Linda's mother. She is busy, and Cindy is her older sister. She is busy as well. So Linda begins the walk home at 1:00 from school. And I think if you go down, actually, there's a couple visuals of the family that I have. Thank you. This is Linda's family. I did not have the name of her younger sister, but that is her father and her mother, and then her sister, Cindy. Linda is the young girl on the left, the middle child. She was particularly close with her father, Richard. If you go down too, you'll see a couple more pictures of the family. So Linda starts the walk home, and if you go down, there should be a map, and that map shows where the school was and where the home was. That looks really far, Carrie.
How far was it?
Yeah.
So Linda and I were at Harbor View together. Summer school was held at Lincoln. And I'm going to say it was probably 1.5 to 2 mile, not quite 2 mile walk, maybe 1.5 miles, if that, to get from Lincoln to her house.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. So Linda starts the walk home. Now, there is a woman who sees Linda. She's a young girl at the time. I think she's 17 or so. If you go down to Albert, we should be able to show a visual of her. Her name is Janine. I think she goes by Jandy. And so she is with her mother, and they see Linda at the corner of Marguerite and Inlet. And Linda is there talking to a man who has a blue van. It's described as a van that's slightly darker than the Sears turquoise blue. I saw this. I don't know. This has not been confirmed as the suspect's truck. But they're the last people to see Linda. Now, the mother of Janine's mother takes note of what the suspect looks like, but doesn't immediately report it because it doesn't look like Linda is in danger. She just makes note of Linda with this strange man or stranger.
Sure.
And then they go home. But Linda never goes home. And so the family start to get worried about Linda's whereabouts, obviously, as she's not home. And so they report her missing, and people begin searching for Linda. For Linda. Were you part of that, Carrie? Were you searching for her on the night or the morning of her disappearance?
No, I was not part of that.
Yeah, so they searched in and around Corona del Mar, which is where she lived. Also in and around Newport Beach, right, Carrie? Because that was just on like the peripheral.
Yes, yeah. So I believe they searched at the youth center, which was a community center where, all the kids in the neighborhood hung out. I believe they talked about searching the reservoir. That may have been referring to what we called the gully. The gully was kind of a dip. If you go from one side of Corona del Mar to the other, to where Linda lived, there was a gully that you had to go through. And so I believe they searched there.
Yep. Yes. And so ultimately, a group of people who were looking for frogs in the back bay around Newport Beach, they come across her body at 10 a.m. on July 7th, which is Saturday, the very next day. And so Linda is found. If you go down, touching back on the handmade clothes, if you go down, Albert, yeah. So Linda is found in this dress on the right-hand side, if you're watching. That was a dress that her mother made for her, as well as the book bag, which is on the left-hand side. So both of those were handmade by her mother. And so Linda is found strangled to death in the Back Bay in Newport Beach. There is DNA recovered from Linda's body, and they do hold on to the DNA. Now, Janine, who we spoke of earlier, Jandy, she and her mom give an eyewitness account of the suspect that they saw with the blue van, because they come forward now knowing that Linda is missing. And so if you go down, there should be a sketch, a sketch of who they saw with the van. So there on the right-hand side is the full description and of the special bulletin, and then on the left, I've sort of blown up their description of what he looked like.
And the mother remembered, as you say, she took real note of what he looked like.
What's so interesting is she took real note, and this looks very much like the man.
Wow.
So they didn't get the license plate, but they got a very close description of what he looks like. And so they search and search, but the case does go cold, right, Carrie?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. They interview some people. If you go down, I have a couple of newspaper articles about the incident and about her being missing. So there's the LA Times. There's also, if you go down, there's a report from the Daily Pilot, which was actually owned by the LA Times. And these are all articles in 1973, I believe. I have 1978 there, but 1973. So then in 2018, if you go down, the Newport Beach Police Department decides to use social media to garner up some sort of new attention on this cold case on the 45th anniversary of when it happened. So July 6, 2018.
Wow.
And they start a story called #LindaStory on social. And they start to tell what happened from the perspective of Linda. And so they show never before seen photos. They talk about the case. And this does sort of re-energize interest and conversation about this cold case that now has been cold for 45 years. And they start to run the DNA. And so when they run the DNA, they apply it to CODIS, but they still have no match in CODIS, which is the national database for any felons or anyone who's given DNA to the police departments, but there is no match. So if you go down, when they run the DNA, they actually run it to have a better understanding of the makeup of the DNA, and they do a possible representation of what the suspect looks like. So if you go down, you'll see what the computer formulated as sort of, if you go down one more, as sort of who the suspect looked like.
Meaning what he'd look like now?
What he looked like in 1973, which is on the left-hand side, and then what he would look like now for age progression. So they also run the DNA on genealogy sites, and there is a match. And in fact, the suspect whose DNA matches the DNA that was left on Linda O'Keefe is on one of these ancestry websites. And so they go to where he is, which is Colorado, and they take a discarded object that has his DNA on it, and they run it, and it is, in fact, an exact match for the DNA on Linda O'Keefe. And if you go down, this is the man, James Allen Neal. He looks very similar to the drawing, the sketch, and he looks very similar in some ways to the computer-created imagery of based on his genes, his DNA. So he is arrested in 2019, and he is taken to jail. He does not admit to the murders. And so he is put in jail. I think he's extradited to California, but he dies in prison before he ever sees a courtroom. And he dies in July of 2020. It is said that he didn't die of COVID, that he died of natural causes, but he never, in fact, is
I mean, he's not very old. I'd be surprised
He's
if
73, I think.
Yeah,
78,
maybe that's old enough too. But
Yeah.
natural. He looks a little like Mark. Who said that? That's not very cool. Puzo, please.
If you go down, there's a picture of him as he's arrested, as he's in custody. So this is obviously an age progression of the other two photos of when he's taken into custody. He had been he did a horrible, tragic, awful thing, but he had been doing that his whole life. And if they had caught him in 1973 when Linda was murdered, he wouldn't have gone on to do several other sexual assaults and other things that he did to young girls.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was a criminal from when he was a young boy. Yeah. He changed his name several times, but the only name that I have for him is James Allen Neal, but that is not his birth name. Yeah. He moved states after the crime. Didn't he leave California fairly quickly, Carrie? And I think he went to Florida, of course.
He went to Florida, and then I believe also Colorado.
Yeah. So
that's a shot of him, I think, in
this is him. Yeah,
in the interrogation room.
Interrogation room. They left a photo of Linda and left the room to see what he would do, and he doesn't admit to it. He says things like, "Sorry, baby girl, it wasn't me, but I'm sorry what happened to you." But I think there was a sense at the time of
he knows he's being watched.
Yeah.
So, he's performing at that point. Yeah.
With the DNA, there was
how did your DNA get in on this girl,
exception.
pal?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's so ugly. Another monster. But it's the good news. I mean, if there is, it's so tragic. But that they could somehow revive it that way, then the 45th anniversary, and then somehow generate the interest.
They take the DNA, they match it. And then I heard some reports that he put his DNA up on this site, which means that he did not think that he left DNA, or he did not think that it was going to be traceable. Did you continue to follow this story, Carrie?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's my whole life.
Yeah. Wow. It's just.
When you were living there where she was abducted, you were then, I know you weren't part of the search team, you're probably a little young for that anyway at that time, but I'm wondering, do you remember the community sort of gripped by this story and questions as to what happened?
I remember the story, and Mark, I had to ask my mom about that because, I wondered the same thing. Did everybody go on lockdown? And she really doesn't remember that. But, this community was so safe. And I mean, this was a neighborhood where, kids, we stayed out till the streetlights came on. And I don't remember, and my mom didn't remember any, type of community scare where all of a sudden parents were keeping their kids in or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a...
it was said that kids on bikes were, in fact, out looking for Linda. But I had the same question with Carrie, which was, what was the immediate reaction of parents? I mean, of course, now it's changed so much. How
absolutely.
How we drop kids off at school and how we monitor them at school. So...
what a fascinating
story.
45 years later.
45 years later. Yep.
Well, this is really cool of you to come spend a few minutes with us on this, especially since you lived it. And there is the headstone, right? That's
that was the headstone. That's her also. I mean, imagine too being part of his family, and suddenly your dad or your grandfather is arrested for the rape and murder of a young girl from 1973, among other crimes, right, that he was arrested for in the state of California. But I mean, it just must have been just absolutely.
What we really hope with, the advances in DNA and especially familial DNA is, it's got to be a deterrent for, some of these people. Obviously not everybody is going to be deterred. But I get a little bit of joy thinking that, there are a lot of people out there that are just waiting for that knock at the door,
Right.
Yeah,
That's exactly right. Things have changed. I think that's a great way to put it.
It's a great way to put it. And Cindy actually, Linda's older sister, said her mother never forgave herself, right, Carrie? I mean, there was real guilt, I think, that as I know it from the retelling of the story, that haunted her mother, and even Cindy in some ways, because Cindy also was of driving age and did not go and pick up Linda.
I mean, any parent would, but there's no way that, that area, that small community and everything. I mean, there was no crime. There was no fear of, kids being out. And so, I mean, it's tragic that it happened. But yeah, I mean, I've heard and I've read that too, that, they, of course, have carried that for all these years. But, we all ran loose. We were all walking home from school. All the kids did.
And I mention it only because Cindy was the only living family member when this all happened. So, but thank you so much, Carrie, for joining us. And, it was really,
it was great meeting you.
Really
and I want to say thank you to Kim as well and the team.
Yeah, great to have everything coordinated,
Kim.
So it worked out.
And Albert, thank you.
Yeah,
I'm interested in this whole ancestry DNA thing because we've seen this break other cases too, like the North Bay rapist and other cases where sometimes it's not the suspect that puts their DNA up, it's a family member. And there's a new breed of criminologists that are, ancestry DNA trackers, and they can go on and figure out, okay, this person has, some of this similar DNA. So it could be an uncle, it could be a cousin, it could be, so it's, you don't know if anyone in your family is going to do this. So I think it's amazing how many cases are affected by it.
Yes. Yeah. You're so right. Yep.
Well, I thank you for being here, everyone. I'm glad we convened this the way we did. And I'm glad the story had closure, although, always when there's a loss like this, it's so difficult. But Carrie, the best to your folks. And they're big supporters, and we really appreciate it. And,
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And we look forward to the next time. Carrie Wilson.
Bye,
and
Carrie.
Courtney.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for
having me. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
It's been so long. I'm so glad to hear that you're doing better.
I'm so sorry you have COVID, my friend.
I know. I mean, you think you go to Vegas and you shove yourself in these busy shows with tons of people and no air, and then you wonder why you're sick.
It was pretty much a textbook exposure, I thought.
Oh, man.
Very much. I mean, if you were looking for the non-vaxxers, they were all in the same room. Of
course they were.
Yeah.
Oh, I hope you feel better.
But thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Courtney. Appreciate you being here. Thank you, Courtney. And that is True Crime Corner for today.
True Crime Corner, only on The Mark Thompson Show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.